The mainstream media hyped up the threat of extremism in the US military, but it turns out it might be the media that's extreme. Welcome to America Uncovered, I'm Chris Chappell. According to a mainstream media narrative, extremism is rife in the US military. After the January 6th Capitol riot, it came to light that some of the rioters had US military ties. And the headlines started rolling in. NPR reported that nearly 1 in 5 defendants in Capitol riot cases had served in the military. AP said Capitol rioters included highly trained ex-military and cops. You can tell based on how well organized the January 6th riot was. Yep, just look at all that military precision. These headlines helped make the Capitol rioters look terrifying. But that was just the beginning, because it wasn't enough to just paint the rioters as unhinged ex-military types. The entire US military was now suspect. News outlets jumped at the chance to portray the US military as packed full of far-right, racist extremists. The New Republic made it clear that the US military had a white supremacy problem. CNN went further, claiming that the military had long had an extremism problem. Pressure to address extremism in the military led Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to order a memorandum in February 2021. That memorandum called for a day-long stand-down for officers to address extremism in the ranks. Soldiers had to do discussions about extremisms, which most found to be kind of a waste of time. Kind of like those DARE programs, which totally prevented anyone I knew from becoming addicted to fentanyl. Austin issued a second memorandum in April 2021, detailing new steps to combat extremism in the military, including an independent study on extremist behavior in the total force. The Institute for Defense Analysis, or IDA, was given this task. And here it is, finally! The IDA was supposed to finish its report in June of 2022, but it only just came out after Christmas last month. A year and a half late. Who wrote that thing? George R.R. Martin? No, of course not. They actually finished it. It's a long report, 262 pages, so there's a lot in there. And it's way worse than you can imagine. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. So, just from reading news headlines, you'd get the impression that the military has more of a hate and extremist problem than the general public. But it turns out the real problem is the media. Because the DoD report found no evidence of disproportionate extremism within the military at all. The report found no evidence that the number of violent extremists in the military was any different from the number of violent extremists in the United States as a whole. Although, to be fair, the review did find some indication that the rate of participation by former service members is slightly higher and may be growing. Which was enough for USA Today to claim extremism is becoming more common in the military, right after taking credit for the report's release. That's, what's the word I'm looking for? A little extreme? The report also found no evidence of extremist behavior by DoD civilians or contractors. Now, it is possible that extremist behaviors are happening and the researchers from the Institute of Defense Analysis just didn't find them. But the findings are consistent with the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism's January 2022 findings on violent extremism in the US military, as well as RAND Corporation's May 2023 survey, which concluded that support for extremism among US military veterans is similar to the public at large. That RAND survey also found that veterans expressed much lower support for white supremacists than the US population overall. Not the picture I get when I hear from news outlets that the US military's racist elements are alive and well. But I guess that's sexier than the US military's racist elements are alive and well, but at a similar rate than the rest of the population. So maybe look at yourselves before casting stones, you know? The Department of Defense also reports regularly on extremism in the military. Just a month before the IDA's report, the DoD's Inspector General released its own annual report on extremism for 2022 to 2023. It found 183 allegations of extremism, a majority of which fell under the categories of support for terrorism or for unlawfully overthrowing the US government. Ha! We got 'em! Run the headlines! Extremism is alive and well. But keep in mind that it's just listing allegations. Could the actual number of extremist cases be higher? Possibly. Possibly good enough. Run the headlines. The thing is, all those investigations are running into the same problem that the media run into time and time again, defining extremism. I'll tell you more about that problem after the break. Welcome back. So it seems like the DoD and the Biden administration were overblowing the threat of extremism in the military when they made a lot of fanfare about countering it. It's kind of like Y2K, only instead of everyone being afraid of everything going black, everyone's afraid the army's full of people afraid of everything going black. One of the problems is defining extremism. The Army, Navy, and Air Force each have a different reporting structure and use different electronic systems for reporting allegations of extremism. There's also the fact that the DoD has used a wide variety of terms, phrases, and concepts to describe prohibited extremist behaviors and activities. What counts as extremism? How do you distinguish extremism from just harassment or bullying or just an offensive joke? How you answer those questions determines how you determine whether someone engaged in extremism, which can vary from branch to branch. It's no surprise then that service members told IDA researchers they are unaware of or confused about existing definitions and standards. This makes cracking down on extremism very difficult. To address this issue, the DoD published an improved definition of prohibited extremist activities at the end of 2021. However, the DoD isn't really clear on how to apply it, and there are still policies that are inconsistent with the DoD's improved definition. And definitions are exactly the problem. How do you define extremism? It seems like people, especially the mainstream media, are a little too eager to out whatever they call extremists. It's almost as if the mainstream media wants rampant extremism. It's like when Joker came out and it felt like the media was praying it would inspire mass shootings. Instead, all inspired were lazy Halloween costumes and injuries from falling while dancing on stairs. And that's precisely the issue. There's a lot of baggage surrounding the very topic of extremism, and it's thanks in no small part to politicized mainstream media poisoning discussions about it. They keep using the term extremist to label people with views that they don't like, such as Republicans and conservative groups, especially those who aren't on board with so-called gender-affirming care. And let's not forget about Joe Rogan. Don't pretend you don't know what Joe Rogan is all about. They basically call anyone who disagrees with them extremists. You liked The Last Jedi, but didn't think it was the best Star Wars film of all time? Way to parrot extremist talking points. Now, I'm not trying to downplay the threat of extremism. It does exist in one form or another, and it can be dangerous. But the term extremist gets thrown around for everything. It's really similar to how in China you could be labeled a counter-revolutionary. It was a completely meaningless term that was just used as a club by people in power to attack anyone they didn't like. Because of this, it's getting harder and harder to even define the term extremist anywhere, not just in the military. It's like how so many people said literally when they really meant figuratively, that literally now means figuratively in literal dictionaries. They are ruining words. No wonder people have started trusting the mainstream media less and less. But the IDA wasn't just tasked with investigating extremism in the military, it was also tasked with suggesting possible steps forward. And that's where the media's poison really shows. The IDA is well aware that the mainstream media's accounts of the January 6th rioters with military ties magnify the actions of a few and provide little information on the overall scope of the problem of extremism. It's also well aware of how politicized the word extremist has become, and how some members of the armed forces might feel that they're being targeted for simply having views that don't align with what's considered mainstream. Wait, so now having views that aren't mainstream is extremist? So does that mean that hipsters are all extremists? I knew I was right to distrust them. That's why IDA interviewees almost uniformly opposed legislation to add a specific offense of extremism to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. One senior military lawyer told the IDA that doing so would be a bad idea because an extremism offense has potential political overtones. No kidding. Just remember to say the right things around your friendly neighborhood morale officer, comrade. And this is where things get weird. They want to punish people for beliefs, thoughts in their heads. Now, if you commit a crime, well, there's already laws to deal with that, and the military does. The IDA warns that the risk of widespread polarization and division in the ranks from counter-extremist policies may be greater than the radicalization of a few service members. That's why one of its recommendations is to avoid making extremist activity a separate criminal offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Because in light of the inherent gray areas in any definition of extremism, a punitive approach to all forms of prohibited extremist activities would risk alienating a significant part of the force. Which part? The part that values not being randomly labeled an extremist. Given how the mainstream media operates, though, I wouldn't be surprised if newspapers came out with a story like, "Military won't stop extremism in fear that it'll alienate extremists in the ranks." Like I said, it's like the MSM wants extremism, which, come to think of it, is pretty extremist behavior. But speaking of extremism and military services, Warhammer 40K. Check out the latest from my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming. America Uncovered wouldn't exist without your support. All it takes is $1 an episode, and you can set a monthly limit. Click on that orange button to head over to Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.